I spent 6 hours and $300 on a perfect prime rib dinner for my family. And then, right before we were supposed to eat, I threw all of it in the garbage. You're about to find out exactly what they did to deserve it. Picture this, it's family dinner night. But this isn't just any family dinner night. In my family, these things are a competitive sport. My dad thinks he's a grill master because he managed not to burn hot dogs one time back in 1998. My mother believes any meal not cooked to the exact specifications of her long-dead mother is an act of high treason. My older brother, Mark, thinks his ability to order expensive takeout makes him Gordon Ramsay. His wife, Susan, has a list of food allergies and aversions so long it needs its own color-coded spreadsheet. And my younger sister, Chloe, she only eats whatever's currently trending on TikTok. So you see, cooking for them isn't just cooking, it's a gauntlet. It's a trial by fire, literally and figuratively. For years, I played it safe. I'd bring a boring salad. I'd make a dessert that was basically just assembling stuff other people baked. I stayed in my lane. But this time was different. I'd just gotten a huge promotion at work. The kind you dream about, the result of years of late nights and enough stress to power a small city. I felt capable, and I wanted to share that feeling with my family in the only universal language I know, an incredible, over-the-top meal. I wanted to make a grand gesture that said, "I've made it, and I want to celebrate with you." That grand gesture had a name, prime rib. Not just any prime rib either. I'm talking the king of roasts. I went to a specialty butcher downtown, the kind of place where the guys behind the counter have names like Gus and have forgotten more about beef than I'll ever know. I walked in and declared my mission. Gus, a man built like a fridge with a smile that could melt butter, led me to the aging locker. And there it was, a 10-pound bone-in prime-grade rib roast. The marbling was an intricate web, a promise of a melt-in-your-mouth experience. It was beautiful, it was perfect. It was also, and I need to be crystal clear about this, $300. $300. As Gus wrapped it up, I felt a jolt of adrenaline. The weight of it in my arms felt like a trophy. It was an investment in a perfect evening. The day of the dinner, my kitchen turned into a command center. I let the roast sit out for hours to get to room temperature. I made a rub that was, frankly, a work of art. Fresh rosemary, whole garlic cloves, coarse pepper, flaky sea salt. The smell filled the whole house, a fragrant promise of the feast to come. I massaged that herb crust into every inch of the roast like a sculptor with a masterpiece. I seared it in a cast-iron pan that was practically volcanic, creating a deep mahogany crust to lock in all the juices. Then into the oven it went, low and slow, with a digital probe thermometer, my lifeline stuck right in its heart. For the next several hours, my entire world was that roast. I basted it. I watched the temperature climb degree by agonizing degree. I wasn't just cooking, I was conducting a symphony. I was proud. I felt that warmth you get when you pour your heart into something for people you love. Looking back now, what an idiot I was. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock sharp, signaling the arrival of the critics. My family. They came in on a wave of cold air and immediate judgment. The first hour was the jocular jabs phase. That's where the insults are disguised as jokes, so if you get offended, you're the one who can't take a joke. My brother Mark was first. He sniffed the air dramatically. "Whoa, playing Top Chef today, are we?" he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder way too hard. "Smells ambitious. Let's hope you've got the fire department on speed dial." I forced a smile. "Funny, Mark, it's just a roast." His wife, Susan, glided in, wrinkling her nose. She peered at my neatly chopped herbs. "Is that rosemary?" "Oh, it's just a very strong scent, isn't it? It can be overpowering." She said it like a foregone conclusion. "It'll mellow out," I said, my smile getting tighter. My dad wandered in and stared at the oven. Prime rib, huh? Tricky cut. You miss your window by 5 minutes and you've got a $300 piece of shoe leather. I've got a thermometer in it, Dad. I'm watching it. A thermometer, he grunted, as if I'd suggested using a magic wand. Your grandfather never needed one. He cooked by instinct. He conveniently forgot that my grandfather was famous for cremating every piece of meat he ever touched. I'm just telling myself, okay, deep breaths. This is just them. Don't let it get to you. I poured them drinks. I put out the baked brie with fig jam I'd made. Mark poked it. What's this, a cheese wheel? It's baked brie, I said. Huh, he replied, before walking off to talk about his golf swing. And so be. Egan Hour 2, the passive-aggressive power play phase. The jokes were replaced by a steady drip of backhanded comments and helpful suggestions. My mother took her turn. Honey, she began, in that sweet tone that always comes before a kill shot. Are you sure you seared that long enough? I read an article that said the key is an almost black sear. That one looked a little brown. It's perfect, Mom, trust me. I do trust you, dear. I'm just trying to help. You spent so much money after all. It would be a shame if... She let the sentence hang there, a ghost of future disappointment. My sister, Chloe, looked up from her phone. Oh my God, look, she said to the room. She showed everyone a photo of a perfect steak dinner. My friend's mom had her dinner catered by the Gilded Steer. Doesn't that look amazing? It did look amazing. It looked like it was made by professionals with a food stylist. It made my kitchen, now covered in grease and flop sweat, look pathetic. Looks nice, Chloe, I said through my teeth. My smile was gone. It had packed its bags and left. I was defending every choice I'd made. The beautiful smell of the roast was being choked out by the toxic smog of their doubt. My kitchen now felt like a witness stand. Then came the third hour, the full frontal assault. The roast was out, resting on the cutting board. A magnificent bronzed behemoth. It was perfect. The thermometer read 125 degrees F exactly. It was a culinary triumph. But they didn't see that. They saw an opportunity for the grand finale. They gathered around the island like wolves. Smells kind of herby, Mark announced. Like you're burning potpourri. That's the rosemary, Mark, I said. My jaw so tight my teeth were grinding. I just really hope it's not dry, Susan chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern. It would be a tragedy to spend that much on what's essentially high-end beef jerky. My mother went into full I'm just trying to help mode. You know, you could whip up a quick horseradish cream sauce. That can really help cover up any dryness. It's a good trick for saving a roast. Saving, the word echoed in my ears. My roast didn't need saving. My sanity did. My dad launched into a story. You know, this reminds me of the time I grilled a T-bone back in 03. They were just talking to each other now, a Greek chorus of negativity, right over the masterpiece I had spent 6 hours and a small fortune on. I just stood there, knife in hand, and listened as they reduced my gesture of love into a punchline. And then came the final blow, from Mark, of course. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and looked at me with a smug smile. You know, he said, loud enough for everyone. For $300, we could have just gone to a restaurant, a place where the food is actually guaranteed to be good. Guaranteed to be good. That was it. That was the moment. The air went still. All I could hear was a rushing in my ears and a sudden, terrifying calm. The hours of biting my tongue, of forced smiles, of their casual cruelty, it all came together. They didn't want my cooking. They didn't appreciate the effort. They saw a chance to feel superior. And in that moment, I decided I was done feeling small. If they wanted guaranteed food, I'd give it to them. A strange thing happens when you're pushed past your breaking point. For me, it wasn't hot rage. It was an icy calm, the chilling clarity of someone with nothing left to lose. My desire to please them, to win their approval, it all evaporated, replaced by a single purpose. They had to learn a lesson. I looked at the roast, my beautiful, perfect $300 roast glistening under the lights. It represented 6 hours of my life, my promotion, my pride. And I realized with a certainty that was almost scary that they were not worthy of it. So let me ask you, before I tell you what I did next. After 3 hours of being told your best isn't good enough, of being mocked and insulted by the very people you're trying to honor, what would you do? At what point is turning the other cheek just an invitation to get slapped again? Was I wrong to decide that enough was, finally, enough? I didn't say a word. I just picked up the large wooden cutting board. The weight was substantial. My family fell silent, watching me. They probably thought I was moving it to carve. They thought the show was about to begin. It was, just not the one they were expecting. I turned and took 3 steps to the large stainless steel trash can. A voice of reason screamed in my head, "That's $300. That's a week of groceries. Don't do it." But it was drowned out by a louder voice, whispering every snide comment from the last 3 hours. A statement must be made. I positioned the cutting board over the trash can. I tilted it. The roast slid, heavy and final. It landed with a sickeningly wet thud that sucked all the air out of the room. The sound of my patience hitting rock bottom. Tom, for good measure, I let the cutting board clatter in on top of it. Silence, utter, complete, stunned silence. I turned to face them. Their faces were a portrait of disbelief. Mark's smug grin was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed stare. Susan's hand was over her mouth. My mother looked like she just witnessed a murder. My dad's brain seemed to have short-circuited. I felt nothing, no regret, just serene emptiness. I walked past them, pulled out my phone, and my hands were perfectly steady. I opened the Domino's app. The cheerful logo felt like a punchline. I scrolled past the specialty pizzas. No, this was a moment for blunt force mediocrity. 1 large pepperoni, 1 large cheese, and 1 large veggie for the illusion of health. No extra cheese, no special crust. The most basic, generic pizza experience possible. The total came to $46, a pittance. I stared at the number, a grim smile touching my lips. It was perfect. I tapped place order. The confirmation popped up. Your delicious Domino's will arrive in an estimated 30-40 minutes. Delicious. I almost laughed. I put my phone away and walked back to the living room where my family was still frozen in the kitchen doorway. I sat down on the sofa, crossed my legs, and waited. Those 30 minutes were the longest and quietest of my life. I sat on the couch, saying nothing. My family eventually shuffled into the living room, scattering awkwardly. The only sound was the ticking of a clock, each tick a hammer blow against the silence. They were waiting for something, an explanation, an apology, for me to yell, "Just kidding," and pull the roast from its greasy grave. I gave them nothing. I just let them stew in the quiet they had created. It was, I have to admit, deeply satisfying. Then the doorbell rang, a harbinger of cheesy, doughy justice. Every head snapped towards the door. I rose slowly, deliberately. I opened it to a bored-looking delivery driver holding 3 pizza boxes. The smell of hot cardboard and greasy pepperoni wafted in. It smelled like triumph. I paid, added a generous tip, and took the warm, flimsy boxes. I closed the door and turned to face them. I walked to the dining room, where the table was still perfectly set with good china and cloth napkins. And right in the center, where the magnificent roast was supposed to be, I placed the stack of Domino's boxes with a soft thud. I stepped back, the silence stretched, my mother finally broke. What is this?" she whispered, looking at the boxes like they were an alien artifact. "Where's the roast?" This was it, time for the sermon. I looked at each of them, making direct eye contact, letting my gaze land on Mark. "You wanted food from a place that's guaranteed to be good," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Here you go, Domino's. Consistent, reliable, and guaranteed to be exactly what you expect." I paused, then gestured toward the kitchen. "The prime rib," I continued. "The one that smelled like potpourri, the one you were all so sure was dry and ruined, the one I apparently needed to save, is in the trash, right where you all seemed to think it belonged." I looked from their stunned faces to the pizza boxes and gave them a cold, simple, two-word command. "So eat the pizza." My dad's face was pale. Susan looked like she was going to be sick. My mother had tears in her eyes. And Mark just stared, speechless. The critic had no critique. The food expert was about to eat mass-produced pizza on his wife's grandmother's china. The irony was so thick you could have carved it with the knife I was supposed to use on that roast. The aftermath wasn't loud. It was worse. It was a thick, suffocating, funereal silence. They just stared at the pizza boxes, the cheerful red and blue logo mocking them from the center of the elegant table. Finally, my dad, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him, pulled out a chair. He opened the top box. The smell of basic pepperoni pizza filled the air. Without a word, he pulled a slice onto a china plate. The image of my father in his Sunday best, silently eating a floppy slice of Domino's on heirloom china, is burned into my memory forever. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, grabbed a slice of cheese pizza and retreated to a corner to scroll on her phone. To her, food was food. My mother started crying silently. She didn't touch the pizza. Susan looked at Mark with a mixture of fury and humiliation. They had a short, whispered, frantic argument, the "this is all your fault" kind, and left without a word. My mom and dad stayed. We sat in that horrible quiet. My dad finished 2 slices. My mom never moved. Eventually, my dad stood up, took my mom's arm, and they walked to the door. Before she left, my mom turned to me, her eyes red. "I don't understand why you would do something so wasteful, so hateful. I don't understand why you would treat someone you love like that," I replied, my voice flat. "And the why left?" "The house has been quiet since. Radio silence for about a week. Then my mom called with a stilted, awkward apology that sounded more like she was sorry I reacted that way than for what they'd actually done. The relationship is strained. We're talking, but it's careful. Like they're worried any stray comment might send another dinner into the trash. Maybe that's not a bad thing." So that's the story of the $300 pizza revenge. Now I have to ask you, the jury of the internet, am I the asshole? Was throwing away a $300 prime rib a petty, wasteful crime? Or, after 3 hours of relentless criticism, did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know what you would have done in the comments. I really want to know. And if you enjoy a little justified petty revenge, make sure to like and subscribe. Because I have a feeling this isn't the last family story I'll have to tell. Honestly, I don't regret it. The pizza was mediocre, the financial loss was painful, but the memory of the stunned silence on their faces, priceless. The pizza was forgettable. The silence was delicious. Thanks for watching. I just spent 3 full days and nearly $400 making the perfect vegan Christmas dinner for my entire family. And after all that work, after all that love, I threw every last crumb of it into the trash, right in front of them. Now, the whole family is telling me I'm the villain who ruined Christmas. My phone won't stop blowing up with messages about how wasteful, unhinged, and dramatic I am. But they didn't see what I saw. They weren't the ones who stood there and watched it happen. They didn't see my mother-in-law with a smug, self-satisfied look on her face, deliberately pour animal fat all over the meal I had poured my soul into. They say I destroyed the holiday. I say I was protecting my home, my values, and my sanity from the ultimate act of disrespect. This is about so much more than food. And now I'm at a complete loss and I really need to know what you think. So, you tell me, am I the asshole? To really get why I did what I did, you have to understand what this dinner meant. This wasn't just another holiday meal for me. This was a statement. I've been vegan for over a decade. It's a huge part of who I am, an ethical choice that shapes my life every single day. And for 10 years, I've dealt with my husband's family, a group of very traditional meat and potatoes people, with what I thought was a ton of grace and patience. I never preached. I never judged. I just show up to family parties with my little container of food, smiling through all the jokes about rabbit food and surviving on grass. I put up with the passive-aggressive comments, the accidental mix-ups, and that constant, low-level hum of disapproval. And my mother-in-law, Linda, has always been the queen of this. She's not an obviously cruel woman, but man, she has a way of making you feel small while smiling at you. She's the type who will say, "Oh, I made this special for you." And then you find out later she used chicken broth because it just doesn't taste right without it. It has happened more times than I can count. A soup here, a side dish there. These little acts of culinary sabotage that were always deniable, always just a simple mistake. "Oh, I forgot," she'd say, with that little wave of her hand, as if my deeply held beliefs were as trivial as misplacing her car keys. But this year was supposed to be different. My husband and I bought our first home, and I was going to host Christmas for the very first time. The entire family. His parents, his siblings, their kids, everyone. This was my chance. My chance to finally host on my own terms in my own space. My chance to prove to them that vegan food isn't about deprivation or boring salads. It's about abundance, creativity, and incredible flavor. I wanted to make a feast so spectacular, so undeniably delicious, that for just one night they would forget all about turkey and ham. I wanted them to feel welcomed and loved in my home, but on my terms. This wasn't about converting them. It was about finally being seen. It was about earning just a tiny sliver of respect. The planning started a month ago. I spent hours, honestly days, glued to cookbooks and food blogs, trying to design the perfect menu. I wanted it to feel like Christmas, but new and exciting. I finally settled on a menu I was so proud of, one that I knew would be a true labor of love. The centerpiece was going to be this magnificent mushroom Wellington, a notoriously tricky dish. It has a rich, savory filling of mixed mushrooms, chestnuts, and herbs, all wrapped up in a flaky, golden puff pastry I was going to make from scratch. A total showstopper. For sides, I went all out. I planned 2 different stuffings since I know how important stuffing is. One was a vegan wild mushroom and chestnut stuffing, all earthy and rich. The other was a sage, onion, and cranberry stuffing, bright and festive. I found a recipe for what was called the best vegan mashed potatoes, made ridiculously creamy with a secret blend of garlic, olive oil, and a bit of tahini. To go with that, there would be maple-glazed Brussels sprouts with smoky toasted almonds, and as a final touch, vegan Duchess potatoes piped into pretty swirls and baked until golden. For an appetizer, a festive hummus Christmas wreath, decorated with pomegranate seeds and rosemary to look like holly. And for dessert, the grand finale, A decadent, no-bake pistachio chocolate cheesecake with a rich coconut cream sauce that needed a full day to set. This menu was ambitious. It was expensive, and I knew it was going to take everything I had. The real work started 3 days before Christmas. Day 1 was the big shop. I had to go to 3 different grocery stores, the regular supermarket for basics, a specialty health food store for good vegan butter and nutritional yeast, and a local farm market for the best mushrooms and produce. The final bill was just under $400. As I loaded everything into my car, I didn't feel dread, I felt this surge of excitement. This was an investment in my family, in my own peace of mind. 2 days before Christmas, my kitchen basically became a factory. The whole house smelled like simmering herbs and toasted nuts. I started on the things that needed time. I made the creamy pistachio filling for the cheesecake, pressed the chocolate crust into the pan, and tucked it into the fridge to set. The first piece of the puzzle was in place. Then I made the puff pastry from scratch, which is this long process of folding and chilling over and over until you have hundreds of paper-thin layers of vegan butter that promise to be impossibly flaky. I pre-chopped mountains of onions, celery, and carrots, organizing them into containers like a pro chef. Every single step was deliberate. My kitchen was my sanctuary, a place where everything was exactly as it should be. It was all clean, pure, and 100% vegan. Christmas Eve was the final push, the day the magic really started happening. I spent the morning putting together the 2 stuffings, and the smell of sage and rosemary filled the whole house. I made my cranberry sauce from scratch, watching the bright red berries pop and melt down with orange zest and a hint of cinnamon. I parboiled the potatoes for the mash and the duchess, getting them ready for Christmas Day. My husband kept wandering into the kitchen, his eyes wide, saying stuff like, "Honey, this is incredible. You're a machine." And I was. I was running on adrenaline and this deep, burning desire to make everything perfect. That evening Linda called. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Just checking in, dear. So excited for tomorrow. Do you need me to bring anything?" I smiled, feeling so confident. "Nope, it's all under control, Linda. I just want you to come, relax, and enjoy yourself." There was a little pause. "Well, all right then. I just hope there's something we can all eat," she said. It was that familiar little dig wrapped up in a pretty bow. "I promise there will be more food than you can possibly imagine," I said, my voice totally steady. "Just come with an open mind." "Oh, I always do," she chirped, though we both knew that wasn't true. That night when I finally collapsed into bed, my back aching and my hands smelling like garlic and thyme, I felt so proud. The kitchen was spotless and ready for the final sprint. Every component was prepped. Everything was perfect. I had built this feast from the ground up, a fortress of flavor and intention. What could possibly go wrong? I had controlled every single variable. But what I didn't realize was that the one variable I couldn't control was the smiling, passive-aggressive saboteur, who had just promised to come with an open mind. Christmas morning had this electric feeling in the air. I was up before the sun with just the quiet hum of the house for company. I put on some festive music, made a huge cup of coffee, and stepped into my command center, the kitchen. This was it. I started with the Wellington. I carefully rolled out the puff pastry I'd worked so hard on, laid down a protective layer of savory crepes, and then packed in that rich, dark mushroom filling. Folding it felt like wrapping the most important gift of my life. I brushed it with a golden glaze, carved a little pattern on top, and slid it into the oven. An hour later it came out and it was a masterpiece. Perfectly bronzed, magnificently puffed, the whole house smelled like heaven. I actually felt a tear well up in my eye. It looked even better than the picture in the cookbook. The rest of the morning was a happy blur. The mashed potatoes were whipped into a creamy, garlic-infused cloud. The Duchess potatoes were piped and baked. The Brussels sprouts were roasted until they were crispy and perfect. The stuffings were heated through, all their smells mingling in the air. I set the table with our best dishes and a beautiful centerpiece of pine boughs and candles. It was a Christmas scene straight out of a magazine. My family started showing up around 3 p.m. My husband's siblings and their kids came in and their jaws just dropped. "Wow," my sister-in-law said, "I have to admit this looks amazing." I was beaming. This was exactly the reaction I had been dreaming of. My in-laws, Linda and my father-in-law, were the last to get there. Linda swept in and gave me a tight, air kiss on the cheek. My," she said, looking over the buffet on the kitchen island. "You certainly have been busy." There it was again. That tone that sounds like a compliment but feels like a punch. I just smiled. I wanted to make it special. "Please grab a drink. We'll be eating in about 15 minutes. Everyone was mingling in the living room, laughing. I went back to the kitchen for one last check, give the gravy a stir, make sure everything was warm. And that's when I saw her. Linda was standing by the stove. She hadn't gone into the living room. Her back was to me, and she was doing something at the counter. I thought maybe she was just teating a glass of water. But then I saw the small, non-stick pan in her hand. It wasn't one of my pans. And then the smell. It hit me a second later. It wasn't rosemary or mushrooms. It was greasy, smoky. It was unmistakably the horrifying smell of bacon. My blood ran cold. I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, unable to make sense of what I was seeing. She was holding the pan, which I could now see was slick with shimmering, rendered fat, and she was tilting it right over the enormous, beautiful pot of my sage, onion, and cranberry stuffing, the stuffing I had spent hours making. I watched, like it was all in slow motion, as she poured a stream of hot, liquid bacon grease right into the middle of the pot. I saw the little brown, crispy bits of bacon swirl into the breadcrumbs. Then she took a large serving spoon, my serving spoon for that dish, and gave it a quick stir, burying the evidence deep inside. And her face, that's the image that will be burned into my brain forever. It wasn't pure evil. It was a look of smug satisfaction, a little knowing smirk that just screamed there. Fixed it. Like she was the hero, saving her family from my bland vegan food with a harmless flavor boost. For a second I couldn't breathe. The music, the laughter from the other room, it all just faded into a roar in my ears. "What?" I finally choked out, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing?" She jumped and spun around, the smirk gone, replaced by this flustered, deer-in-the-headlights look. "Oh, you scared me, dear. I was just helping." "Helping?" I said, my voice getting louder, fueled by pure rage. "What is in that pan, Linda?" She did that dismissive little hand wave I'd seen 100 times. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a little bacon fat for flavor. It's not Christmas stuffing without it. Don't be so dramatic, no one will even know." No one will even know. The words just echoed in my head. She wasn't just disrespecting me. She was going to deceive the entire family. She was going to let me serve this, let my vegan friends who were coming later eat this, and just watch, smiling, as we all ate the animal fat she'd secretly slipped in. And that's when it all clicked. The dominoes just started to fall in my head. It wasn't just the stuffing. My mind raced. The stuffing pot was right next to the mashed potatoes. Did she use the same spoon to taste them? The gravy was right behind it. Did grease splatter? In her one single act of arrogant sabotage, she hadn't just ruined one dish. She had tainted the entire meal. The whole 3-day, $400 back-breaking labor of love was now a complete lie. It was contaminated. It was garbage. A weird calm washed over me. The rage didn't go away, it just solidified into something cold and clear. I looked at the beautiful Wellington. I looked at the creamy mashed potatoes, the vibrant Brussels sprouts. I looked at Linda's face, which was now shifting into defiance, as if I were the one who'd done something wrong. And I made a decision. I chose chaos. I chose to burn it all to the ground. I walked right past her. I picked up the heavy pot of stuffing, this symbol of her absolute contempt for me. I walked the 10 feet to the large, empty trash can by the back door, and I dumped the entire thing. It hit the bottom of the bin with a sickening, wet thud. The kitchen was dead silent. Linda just stared, her mouth hanging open. Then I turned back to the island. I picked up the bowl of mashed potatoes, into the trash. The platter of Brussels sprouts, into the trash. The Duchess potatoes, trash. By now, the noise had gotten everyone's attention. My husband appeared in the doorway. "Honey, what is going on?" His eyes went wide when he saw me holding the platter with my magnificent, perfect mushroom Wellington. "Don't," he said, taking a step toward me. I looked at him, then at his mother, then back at the Wellington. This was the dish, the one I was proudest of, the one that was supposed to change their minds. And with a feeling of profound, heartbreaking finality, I slid it off the platter and into the trash can on top of everything else. That's when the screaming started. My sister-in-law was in the doorway, hands over her mouth. My father-in-law was yelling my name. "Have you lost your mind?" Linda started to wail, a full-on theatrical performance. "She's ruined Christmas. I was just trying to help. She's crazy. She's ruined Christmas." I just stood there in the middle of my beautiful, now empty kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage. I was breathing hard, my hands shaking. The house smelled of pine and sage and roasted mushrooms and betrayal. And as my entire family stared at me with looks of horror and hatred, I felt two things at once: utterly, devastatingly alone, and for the first time in 10 years, completely justified. The immediate aftermath was just a blur of shock and fury. My nieces and nephews were crying. My brother-in-law was trying tea. "Oh, console," his mother, who was now sobbing into my father-in-law's shoulder, pointing at me like I was a monster. The air was so thick with accusation. Nobody was asking what happened. They'd already made up their minds. I was the villain. My husband, Mark, was the first one to speak to me directly. His face was pale, his voice tight. "What did you do? What in the world did you just do?" I finally found my voice. It was shaking, but it was steady. "Your mother," I said, looking right at Linda, "poured bacon grease into the vegan stuffing." A wave of confused muttering went through the doorway. "Is that true, Linda?" my father-in-law asked. Linda's sobs got louder. "It was just a little bit, for flavor. I didn't think she'd go insane. She threw everything out. She's ruined the holiday for the children." And just like that, the story was written. The focus wasn't on what she did, but how I reacted. It wasn't about the sabotage. It was about the overreaction. "You could have just served the other things," my sister-in-law yelled. "You didn't have to throw everything away. That's so incredibly wasteful." "I couldn't," I tried to explain, my voice rising with frustration. "Don't you get it? She contaminated it. I don't know what spoon she used, what might have splashed. I couldn't serve any of it. It wasn't vegan anymore." My brother-in-law scoffed. "Oh, come on, so it had a little bacon in it. Big deal, it's not poison." But to me, it was. It wasn't just about an animal product, it was the principle. It was a violation, a lie. Food is trust, especially when you have any kind of dietary restriction. She was going to let me and everyone else eat that food under false pretenses. It was such a profound act of disrespect, not just to me, but to my home. It was her declaring that my rules, my values, my asterisk effort meant absolutely nothing. "This was my home," I said, my voice cracking. "I spent 3 days working on this meal. I asked for one thing, for this one day to be respected in my own house, and she couldn't even do that. Nobody was listening. They were all rallying around Linda, the poor, well-meaning mom who was just trying to make the food taste better. They saw a victim of my picky lifestyle. They saw me as a rigid drama queen who chose to ruin Christmas over one ingredient. The accusations just kept coming. I was wasteful. I was selfish. I let my weird food thing destroy a family tradition. It all ended pretty quickly after that. My father-in-law announced they were leaving. "We'll figure something out," he said grimly, helping his wife to the door. "Maybe a restaurant is still open." One by one, they all filed out, shooting me looks of pure contempt. My husband just stood there torn. He looked at me, at the trash can overflowing with our feast, and then at his family leaving. He didn't say a word. He just turned and followed them out the door, leaving me completely alone in the silent, fragrant wreckage of my Christmas. The silence that came after was heavier than the screaming. I stood there for what felt like an hour, just staring at the bin full of food. The beautiful Wellington, the creamy potatoes, all of it just garbage. I finally sank onto a kitchen stool and just let myself cry. Not just for the ruined meal, but for the complete and total invalidation from the people who are supposed to be my family. They didn't just disagree with my reaction, they refused to even see my side. In the days since, the isolation has been deafening. My phone has been a weapon used against me. Texts from my in-laws and even from my husband, who's now staying at his parents' house, all say the same thing. I need to apologize. I need to apologize to Linda for embarrassing her and to the family for ruining their holiday. There's no mention of what Linda did. In their story, she's a footnote, and my reaction is the headline. I find myself questioning everything. Did I go too far? The image of all that food in the trash haunts me. It was asterisk wasteful. Was there another way? Could I have quietly thrown out the stuffing and tried to salvage the rest? Maybe. But in that moment, it felt like a disease had spread through everything. To serve any of it would have felt like accepting her violation, like saying, "Okay, you win." It felt like a betrayal of myself. This wasn't about one meal. It was about a decade of small cuts, of being dismissed and patronized. The bacon grease wasn't the cause. It was just the final straw that broke a dam that had been cracking for years. My husband and I have barely spoken. He just says he doesn't understand why I had to make such a scene, that I put him in an impossible position. I told him his mother put him in that position when she decided her opinion was more important than respecting his wife. We are at a total standstill. So now the house is quiet. The Christmas decorations seem to be mocking me, and I'm left with the fallout. My family says I'm the villain who single-handedly ruined the holiday. I believe I finally stood up for myself against years of disrespect in the only way I knew how, by refusing to serve a meal built on contempt and deceit. And that's why I have to ask you, after hearing everything, the years of it, the days of work, the deliberate sabotage, and the explosive fallout, was I wrong? Should I have handled it differently? Am I the villain who ruined Christmas? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. I slammed the door on my sister and 12 of her uninvited guests on Christmas Day. Now my entire family is blowing up my phone, telling me I'm a monster who needs to apologize. But they're not the ones who had their biggest boundary completely ignored. They weren't the ones left staring through a peephole at a crowd of near strangers expecting a feast that didn't exist, in a home that could barely fit them. So before I even think about apologizing, I need to know, was I truly in the wrong here? This Christmas was supposed to be different. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, it was just supposed to be quiet, peaceful. For the last 5 years, I'd been the family's host for every single holiday. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, you name it, it was at my place. In the beginning, I didn't mind. I had a bigger house, a husband who actually helped, and enough money to not panic about an ever-expanding guest list. But well, things change. A painful divorce last year left me with two amazing kids, a much smaller apartment, and a budget stretched so tight it could snap. This year, I wasn't hosting because I had to. I was trying to build a new, quiet tradition for me and my children. A day of peace, not chaos. The old me would have just buckled under the pressure. The old me was a total people pleaser, especially with my family and most especially with my older sister, Chloe. In our family, Chloe has always been the golden child. She's the sun and the rest of us are just supposed to orbit her. She's charming, charismatic, and has this way of making her problems everyone else's responsibility. For years, I enabled it. Her surprises became this running joke that I never found funny. One Easter, she brought a coworker and her two kids without a word. Another Thanksgiving, it was an old college friend who was just passing through town. Every time I'd scramble, pull out folding chairs, try to stretch the meal with extra potatoes, and just smile through gritted teeth while my own resources got drained. My home wasn't treated like a private space. It was more like a public hall for her social life. But this year was the line in the sand. After the divorce, I had to learn, the hard way, how to set boundaries to protect my peace and my kids' stability. Time and money weren't just abstract things I could throw at a problem anymore. They were precious, and I had to guard them fiercely. So when I decided to host a small Christmas dinner, I was militant about the rules. I invited my parents, my younger brother, and Chloe. The invitation, sent to our family group chat, was crystal clear. So excited to host a small, cozy Christmas dinner this year. Please know that because of my very limited space and budget, I can only accommodate you and a plus one. Can't wait to celebrate with you all. Everyone else got it. My parents were coming alone. My brother was bringing his new girlfriend, who we were all excited to finally meet. It was going to be 8 people total, me, my 2 kids, my parents, my brother, his girlfriend, and Chloe. Or so I thought. I had budgeted for exactly 8. I bought a small turkey breast, not a whole bird. I had exactly 8 place settings of the good Christmas china my grandmother left me. My dining table is a small round one that could maybe asterisk squeeze 8 if we were friendly. Any more, and we'd be eating in shifts on the floor. About a week before Christmas, Chloe called. It started out friendly, all holiday cheer, but I know my sister. I know the tone she uses when she's about to ask for something she shouldn't. It's a little too sweet, a little too casual. "Hey ye," she chirped. "So excited for Christmas. The kids are just bouncing off the walls." "I'm looking forward to it too," I said, my guard already up. "The kids can't wait to see their cousins." "About that," she said, and there it was. "You know how much the kids love Christmas at your place, and my husband, Mark, is really looking forward to it, so that's us 4. I took a deep breath. "Chloe, the invitation said a plus 1. I meant 1, not 3. I'm sorry, but I just don't have the space or the food for that many people." I tried to keep my voice gentle but firm. This was the new me, the me that says no. There was a pause. "Oh," she said, her voice turning chilly. "I just assumed you meant, my asterisk family asterisk. My husband and kids aren't really plus ones, they're immediate family." "They are, but in my apartment there are 4 extra bodies and 4 extra mouths I didn't plan for," I explained, that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "This isn't like the old house. I'm not trying to be difficult, Chloe. I'm just telling you the reality of my situation. I can host you and 1 guest. You can bring Mark or you can bring your oldest, but I cannot host all of you. I'm sorry." She sighed, this long, dramatic sound designed to broadcast how disappointed she was in me. "Fine," she snapped. "Don't worry about it, I'll figure it out." Then she hung up. A part of me felt that pang of guilt. The old people-pleasing part of my brain was screaming, "You're being selfish. It's Christmas. You're breaking up the family." But a stronger part of me felt a flicker of pride. I did it. I held my ground. I sent her a follow-up text a few minutes later just to be crystal clear and have it in writing. To confirm, I'm expecting you and one guest on Christmas Day at 4 p.m. Please let me know who you're bringing so I can set the table. Her response came back almost instantly, a single passive-aggressive word, "Whatever." I chose to take that as an acknowledgement. I figured she'd either show up with just her husband or not at all. In the days before Christmas, I actually put it out of my mind. I decorated with my kids, we baked cookies, we watched Christmas movies. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own holiday. The guest list was set. The menu was planned. The budget was holding. It was going to be okay. That belief was my first and biggest mistake. Christmas Day arrived, crisp and cold. The apartment smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. My kids were playing with new toys, my parents were there admiring the decorations, and my brother and his lovely girlfriend were helping me with appetizers. The vibe was exactly what I had dreamed of: warm, intimate, joyful. At exactly 4:00 p.m., the doorbell rang. "That must be Chloe," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. I walked to the door, a real smile on my face, ready to welcome my sister and, I assumed, her husband. I was ready to let the tension from our call just melt away. I opened the door, and my smile froze. It wasn't just Chloe and Mark. Standing on my tiny landing was a crowd, an actual sea of people. Chloe was front and center, holding a bottle of cheap wine like some kind of peace offering. Behind her was her husband, Mark. Next to them were their 4 kids, already fidgeting and being loud. And behind them, huddled awkwardly, were 7 other adults I had never seen before in my life. 7 complete strangers. My brain did a quick, horrified count. Chloe plus 12 other people. 13 people. 13 people on my doorstep expecting to be let in. My brain just short-circuited. I stared at the crowd, then at Chloe, my mouth hanging open. The noise hit me first. The kids were whining, one of the strange men was laughing loudly, and Chloe was just beaming like she'd brought me the world's best gift. "Merry Christmas," she announced, sweeping her arm out at the horde behind her. "We're here. You said +1, but I couldn't bear to leave anyone out, so I brought the whole crew. There's plenty of food, right?" Those words echoed in my head. Plenty of food, right? It wasn't a question. It was a demand. She hadn't just ignored my boundary, she had taken a bulldozer to it while laughing. She looked at my carefully built wall of no and decided it was just a suggestion. I just stared. The warmth in the apartment seemed to get sucked right out the door. I could feel my parents' and brother's eyes on my back. The happy chatter inside had gone completely silent. "Chloe," I said, my voice just a strangled whisper, "what is this?" Her smile twitched. She saw the look on my face. "Oh, don't be like that," she said, trying to push past me. "It's Christmas. These are our neighbors, the Hendersons, their babysitter, and a couple of Mark's work friends whose families are out of town. They had nowhere to go. I couldn't let them spend Christmas alone, could I? You of all people should understand that." The absolute nerve was breathtaking. She was using the spirit of Christmas against me, painting me as the villain before I even had a chance to react. She created a problem, her friends having nowhere to go, and just decided my home was the solution, without so much as a text. I physically blocked the doorway. "No," I said, and this time my voice was steady. It was cold. It was a voice she'd never heard from me. "No," she repeated, laughing like I told a bad joke. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no," I said, looking past her to the strangers who were now starting to look deeply uncomfortable. "My invitation was for you and one guest. I told you that. I have food for 8 people. I have chairs for 8 people. I do not have room for 13 more." Mark, her husband, finally piped up. "Come on," he said. "Don't be like this. We can squeeze. We'll make it work. The kids have been looking forward to this." Then right on cue, one of her kids started to cry. "I want to see my cousins. Mommy, why can't we go in?" It was a perfectly executed guilt trip. The lonely strangers, the disappointed husband, the crying child. It was all designed to make me break, to turn me back into the old doormat. I could feel my resolve cracking. The thought of this scene, the pure awkwardness, was horrifying. It would be so much easier to us let them in, to scramble and be miserable, but to avoid this confrontation. And then I looked past them all through the open door and saw my own two children peeking around the living room corner, their faces full of confusion and anxiety. In that moment, something inside me just hardened. This wasn't just about my budget or my small apartment. This was about respect. This was about teaching my kids that no is a complete sentence. It was about showing them that it's okay to protect your peace, even if it makes other people mad. It was about, for once, choosing myself and my little family over my sister's chaos. I said no, I repeated, my voice rising. I looked right at Chloe. You knew the rules. You chose to ignore them. You chose to put me in this position and to put these people, I gestured to the strangers, in this incredibly awkward position. This is not my problem to solve. You will not come into my home and do this to me. Not this year. Chloe's face went from fake cheer to pure fury. The mask was off. You have got to be kidding me, she hissed. After everything I do for you, you're going to turn away your own family on Christmas because you're too selfish to share. What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. What's wrong is that for years I've let you walk all over me. I've let you treat my home like a free-for-all, and I've paid the price every single time. That ends today. The conversation is over. You will not do this, she snarled, stepping forward like she was going to force her way in. That was it. That was the final straw. All the years of resentment, of feeling disrespected, all came down to that one moment. My hand was on the doorknob. With a strength I didn't know I had, I pushed. You need to leave, I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. Now. She opened her mouth to scream something else, but it was too late. I shoved the door closed, ignoring the shock on her face and the gasps from the crowd. I turned the deadbolt. The click echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my apartment. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. For a second there was nothing. Then the banging started, a fist hammering against the wood. Open this door right now. Chloe was screaming, her voice muffled but hysterical. The kids were wailing. I could hear Mark trying to calm her down, the confused murmurs of the strangers. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, my heart pounding. I squeezed my eyes shut. Behind me, my family was just frozen, looking at me with a mixture of shock and something I couldn't read. I had done it. I had actually slammed the door on my sister on Christmas Day. The immediate aftermath was pure chaos. The banging on the door eventually stopped, replaced by the screech of tires as they all piled back into whatever clown car they'd arrived in. But my phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, started vibrating and lighting up like a Christmas tree. First came the text from Chloe, each one worse than the last. I cannot believe what you just did. You are a cold, heartless monster. The kids are sobbing. I hope you're happy. You've ruined their Christmas. Don't ever speak to me again. Wait until Mom and Dad hear what you've done. You're finished. She didn't have to wait. My mother, who'd been standing there looking horrified, was the next to go off. She didn't text. She just turned on me, her voice trembling with rage. How could you? She started. That is your sister, your family. You threw them out on Christmas. What is the matter with you? You apologize to her right now. My dad, usually the quiet one, chimed in. This isn't how we raised you. Family is family. You always make room. Did you see them? I asked, my voice still shaky. Did you see how many people she brought? It was 13 people, Mom, 13, after I told her no. This wasn't about making room. This was about a complete lack of respect. Oh, respect, my mother scoffed, throwing her hands in the air. Is respect more important than your family? Than your little nieces and nephews crying on your doorstep? She made a mistake. You forgive and you move on. You don't slam the door in their faces. You should have just let them in. We would have figured it out. But that was the whole point. We asterisk wouldn't have figured it out. I would have. I would have been the one running around stressed and miserable. My asterisk peace would have been shattered. My asterisk kids would have seen their mom get treated like a doormat again. The argument went on for another 20 minutes. They insisted I call Chloe and beg for forgiveness. I refused. I told them if they felt so strongly, they were free to go celebrate with Chloe and her 13 guests. That's when my brother finally spoke up. He looked at my parents and said quietly, "She told Chloe the rules. We all saw the text. Chloe knew what she was doing. It's not fair to put this all on her." My mother just turned her glare on him, and I knew it was a lost cause. The family dynamic, set in stone for decades, was too powerful. Chloe gets excused, and I get blamed for rocking the boat. Defeated, my parents announced they were leaving. They couldn't celebrate in a house where family was turned away. They got their coats and left without another word. So there I was. My grand plan for a peaceful Christmas had completely imploded. My sister had disowned me and my parents had walked out. The small turkey breast, now perfectly cooked, just sat there. The table was set for 8 people who would never come. My kids, who saw the whole meltdown, were sitting on the couch, quiet and sad. The joy was just gone. My brother and his girlfriend stayed. They helped me put the food on the table, and the 5 of us, me, my 2 kids, my brother, and his girlfriend, ate our Christmas dinner in this strange, somber quiet. My brother kept telling me I did the right thing, that Chloe had crossed an unforgivable line. His girlfriend, a woman I barely knew, reached across the table, put her hand on mine, and said, "Your boundaries aren't an attack on anyone. They're a defense of your own well-being. Don't ever apologize for that." Hearing that from a near stranger, when my own mother couldn't see it, made me want to cry. The fallout continued. Chloe posted this long sob story on Facebook about her cruel sister who slammed the door on her children on Christmas. She conveniently left out the part about the 12 extra people, of course. The post was flooded with comments of sympathy for her and trashing me. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years started messaging me, telling me how disappointed they were, how I had torn the family apart. I was officially the Grinch. A small part of me feels a crushing guilt. I did cause a massive rift. I did make children cry, but a much larger part of me feels relieved, empowered even. In the quiet of my apartment after the storm passed, there was this profound sense of peace. The peace of a battle I finally fought. I had spent my entire life caving to my sister, and for the first time I didn't. I protected my home. I protected my kids. I protected myself. The cost was high, but the cost of letting her walk all over me forever would have been so much higher. My family is still furious. The demand coming from my dad via text is that I need to give Chloe a formal public apology to make the family whole again. They say I'm the one who escalated it by slamming the door, but I keep coming back to the same thought. The fight didn't start when I closed the door. It started when she showed up with a dozen uninvited people. I didn't escalate. I ended a situation she created. But the constant criticism is starting to wear me down. The doubt creeps in. Was there a better way? Should I have just let them in to keep the peace? Am I the stubborn, selfish person they're all saying I am? So I have to ask you, was I the asshole? Let me know in the comments who you think was in the wrong here. I'll be reading every single one. And if you think I did the right thing, or if you just like stories about family drama and setting boundaries, make sure to like and subscribe. Your support right now means more than you know. You know how some families fall apart? For some, it's a big explosion, slammed doors, shouting matches, the whole neighborhood gets a show. My family, we fracture quietly. It happens one passive-aggressive comment at a time until you realize the silence between you has become a canyon you can't get across. I always thought our family was the sturdy kind, you know. The kind that could handle any storm with a fresh pot of coffee and a good laugh. But this past Christmas, I learned I was wrong. I learned that even the strongest family trees can have rotten branches, just waiting for a breeze to snap them off. And for me, that breeze wasn't some big tragedy or a dark family secret. It was an email that turned my season of giving into a season of billing. I spent weeks, and I mean asterisk weeks, planning what I thought would be the perfect Christmas dinner for 20 people from my huge, chaotic, amazing family. I was poring over recipes, budgeting like my life depended on it, and I decorated my house until it looked like a literal movie set. And I really thought I'd pulled it off. The night felt like a total success. I mean, there was laughter, clinking glasses. My little cousins were fighting over the last roast potato. It was perfect. But a few days later, just as I was finally starting to relax, I got an email from my aunt. My heart did a little jump, thinking it was a sweet thank you note. It wasn't. It was a professionally formatted, itemized invoice for $600, the charges, insufficient seafood selection, and emotional distress from my subpar menu. In that second, I realized my perfect Christmas wasn't a gift. It was a transaction, and my aunt was here to collect. I had a decision to make, and I knew it was going to change our family forever. So this whole thing really started because I felt like it was my duty, but also I was a little ambitious. For as long as I can remember, my grandmother hosted Christmas. It was a whirlwind of comforting smells and traditions, but Grandma's getting older and someone needed to grab the torch. My mom and her siblings, including my Aunt Carol, had talked about it for years, but no one ever actually did it. There was always an excuse. Their house is too small, they're too busy, it's just too much pressure. But this year I saw my opening. I just bought my first house, a cozy little place with an open kitchen. It was perfect. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to show my family, and maybe even myself, that I was a real adult who could carry on the traditions that held us all together. I told everyone I'd host on a family video call back in October, and the reaction was awesome. My cousins were hyped, my parents were so proud, and I could literally hear the relief in my grandma's voice. The only person who seemed hesitant was Aunt Carol. She smiled, but it was one of those smiles that doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh, that's brave of you," she said, with a tone I couldn't quite figure out. "Christmas is a very important meal. There are expectations." I just brushed it off. It was her usual fussy, formal thing. I was just too excited. Aunt Carol has always been a character. She's the kind of person who will correct your grammar mid-conversation or send wine back at a restaurant because it isn't breathing properly. For her, life is all about meeting certain standards, and guess who the one and only judge is? Her. We'd all just learned to work around her quirks. You don't use the guest towels. You don't comment on her perfect lawn. And you always compliment her cooking, even if it's a bit dry. She hosted Thanksgiving once, maybe 10 years ago, and she spent the whole meal giving a running commentary on the proper technique for carving a turkey. A technique only she had mastered, apparently. The next year, she announced it was all just too taxing and bowed out of hosting forever, though she kept her job as the family's unofficial food critic. Even knowing all that, I was determined to impress her. My planning went into full-on military operation mode. I had spreadsheets. The menu was set by Halloween. I was going to make a gorgeous 16-pound turkey with an orange and rosemary glaze, a honey-baked ham with cloves, creamy mashed potatoes, sausage and apple stuffing, roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon, glazed carrots, homemade cranberry sauce. For dessert, a traditional Christmas pudding, a chocolate Yule log, and a mountain of my grandma's gingerbread cookies. I was covering all my bases. I spent a small fortune at the grocery store. My cart was overflowing. I spent the 2 days before Christmas just chopping, baking, and stirring. My house smelled incredible. I was exhausted, but so happy. This was going to be the Christmas. I felt it in my bones. I'd even made a special plan for Aunt Carol. I remembered her mentioning she liked shrimp cocktail at a wedding once. So, as a special touch, I made this huge platter of it. For an appetizer, It wasn't a full seafood buffet, but it was a nod, a thoughtful gesture, or so I thought. I felt like I had thought of everything and everyone. My budget had exploded from maybe $300 to well over $500, and that's not even counting the new tablecloth and decorations. But when I looked around my house on Christmas Eve, with the lights twinkling on the tree, I didn't care. It was an investment in my family. The cost didn't matter compared to the memories we were about to make. Christmas Day was a total blur of happy chaos. People started showing up around 3 p.m. with gifts and wine, and the house just filled with that cheerful noise of a family together again. My cousins were catching up, my uncles were arguing about sports, and my parents were just looking at me, beaming. It was exactly what I had wanted. Aunt Carol and my Uncle Mark were some of the last to get there. She swept in wearing a cashmere coat, her eyes immediately scanning the room like a security camera. Her first words weren't "Merry Christmas." They were, "Goodness, it's a bit warm in here, isn't it?" She fanned herself dramatically before letting my uncle take her coat. I just smiled through it. "Welcome, Aunt Carol, so glad you could make it. Can I get you a drink?" She glanced at the drink station. I had wine, punch, everything, and just sighed. "I suppose I'll have a glass of the Sauvignon Blanc, as long as it's been properly chilled." A little later, I brought out the appetizers. The star in my mind was the shrimp cocktail. I mean, this thing was enormous. It was a silver tray mounted with ice and at least 3 pounds of jumbo shrimp. My cousins swarmed it, all telling me how amazing it looked. I watched Aunt Carol make her way over. She picked up a single shrimp, held it up to the light to inspect it, and ate it in 2 tiny, delicate bites. She dabbed her lips with a napkin and then turned to me. "This is a nice start," she said, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Where's the rest of it?" I just blinked at her. "The rest of what?" "The seafood," she whispered like it was a secret password. "The oysters, the crab legs. A proper Christmas feast always has a generous seafood offering. This is an appetizer." I could feel my face get hot. I had just spent days cooking a feast for 20 people, and she was acting like I'd just put out a bag of pretzels. "I thought the shrimp would be a nice treat before the main meal," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I focused on a more traditional turkey and ham dinner." She gave me this tight little smile. "Ah, a traditional dinner, I see." And then she just turned and walked away, leaving me standing there next to the shrimp platter, my holiday spirit suddenly fizzling out. From that point on, it felt like this dark cloud of her judgment was just hanging over the whole evening. When I brought out the turkey, golden, glistening, a masterpiece, everyone else gasped. I overheard Aunt Carol lean over to my mother and whisper, "A bit on the small side for 20 people, isn't it? Let's hope there's enough." Spoiler, there was enough for days. At the table, she just pushed the Brussels sprouts around her plate. "I find bacon can often overpower the delicate flavor of the sprouts," she announced to the table. My mom shot me a look from across the table, one of those looks that says, "I'm so sorry, please ignore her." I really did my best to ignore it. I focused on everyone else who was having a blast. The conversation was great, the wine was flowing, and people were laughing. For everyone else, it seemed like the Christmas I dreamed of was actually happening. They raved about the stuffing, asked for my mashed potato recipe, and went back for seconds and thirds. But every time I looked at Aunt Carol, all I saw were her pursed lips and her critical stare. It was like one sour note in an otherwise beautiful song. When dessert came out, she refused everything. "Too many carbs after such a heavy meal," she declared. A simple fruit platter would have been a more elegant choice. By the time she and Uncle Mark were leaving, I was so drained. My face literally ached from smiling for 8 hours. As she stood in the doorway, she took my hands, and for a second I thought she was going to say something nice. "Well, dear," she said, "you certainly tried. It was a valiant effort for your first time." And with that little parting gift, she was gone. I shut the door, leaned against it, and just let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. The house was a wreck. I was exhausted, but I thought, okay, the worst is over. I survived. The next 2 days were pure bliss. I was living in a cocoon of leftovers, cheesy holiday movies, and feeling pretty damn proud of myself. My phone was blowing up with texts from family. Best Christmas ever. That turkey was legendary. My parents called again just to tell me how proud they were. It all washed away the sting of Aunt Carol's comments. She was just being her, an outlier. The vote was in. The day had been a massive success. I was already daydreaming about what I could do next year. Then, on the evening of December 27th, the email came. The subject line was just, "Christmas dinner reimbursement." It was from Aunt Carol. I honestly thought it was a joke. Like, maybe this was her weird, clumsy way of offering to chip in for groceries. I actually laughed as I clicked it open. The laughter died in my throat. It wasn't a note, it was a PDF. I opened it and my screen filled with this document that looked scarily official. It was a real business-style invoice. Her name and address were at the top under a heading that read, Carol's Culinary Consultancy. Below that was my name and address under Client. And then the itemized list. My brain just short-circuited. Line item 1, lobster shortfall. The description said, failure to provide industry-standard holiday seafood centerpiece, based on market price for 2 pounds of lobster per expected portion for one adult. The bill, $300. Line item 2, shrimp omission. Description, provision of appetizer-level shrimp quantity insufficient for a main course offering, compensation for lack of variety and volume. Bill, $200. Line item 3, emotional distress and palate disruption. I had to read that one twice. The description was the wildest part. Psychological and sensory damages incurred due to a demonstrably subpar and incomplete festive menu, leading to a diminished holiday experience. Bill, $100. Total amount due, $600. My heart was pounding. I felt sick. This could not be real. And then at the bottom there was a notes section. It said, "Dear my name, as you advertised and took on the responsibility of hosting the family's primary Christmas feast, there was an implicit contract to provide a meal up to the standard of family traditions, which include a significant seafood component. Your failure to do so resulted in a significant personal and culinary deficit on my part. Please find enclosed the invoice for reimbursement. Payment is due by January 1st to avoid the necessity of further action." I just stared at the screen. Implicit contract, culinary deficit, further action. Was she threatening to sue me? Over a lack of crab legs at a Christmas dinner I hosted for free. The shock started to curdle into pure boiling rage. I spent hundreds of dollars and days of my life creating a beautiful day for our family. I put up with her rudeness and her little insults all night. And this was my thank you. Not just no thank you, but a bill for her own entitlement. That perfect Christmas now felt like a complete joke. It was spoiled. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to my core, this wasn't something we could just laugh off later. This was a line, and she had just crossed it. For a solid 10 minutes I just sat there, reading the email over and over. I kept waiting for the "just kidding" part, but it wasn't there. The sheer audacity was paralyzing. My first impulse was to call her and just scream, "What is wrong with you?" But I stopped myself. I knew that arguing with her while I was this angry would just end with her twisting it all around and somehow making me the bad guy. She was a black belt in that. So instead I called the one person who would get how insane this was, my mom. I forwarded her the email first. 2 minutes later her name popped up on my phone. I answered and there was just dead silence for a second. Then she said, "Oh, Carol, no, she didn't." "She did, Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "She sent me a $600 bill for Christmas." I heard my mom let out this long, tired sigh that sounded like it held about 50 years of dealing with her sister. "I am so sorry," she said. "This is a new low even for her. Do not pay this. Don't even reply yet. Let me talk to your father." Hearing her say that was such a relief. I wasn't crazy. This was just as nuts as I thought. While she did that, I did the next best thing. I screenshotted the invoice, blacked out our names, and sent it to the family group chat, the one with all my cousins, but pointedly without Aunt Carol. The chat immediately blew up. "No way. Is this a joke? She invoiced you for Christmas." My cousin Jake, who I personally saw eat 4 plates of food, wrote, "Should I send her an invoice for the gastrointestinal distress her presence caused me?" Another cousin, Sarah, replied, "Only $100 for emotional distress. She's lowballing herself. Being that miserable has to be worth at least $500. The dark humor was exactly what I needed. It reminded me that the entire younger generation saw this for what it was, completely bonkers. My mom called back 20 minutes later. "Okay," she said, her voice totally firm. "Your father and I agree. You need to reply, but keep it short, professional, and give her zero emotional ammunition. Do not apologize. Do not explain. Do not get angry." Together, we wrote up a reply. It was a thing of beauty, a masterpiece of cold, corporate politeness. Subject: Ray, Christmas dinner reimbursement. Dear Aunt Carol, thank you for your email and the attached document. I have reviewed the invoice. However, as the Christmas dinner I hosted was a personal gift to the family and not a commercial event, there was no contract, implicit or otherwise. Therefore, I will not be remitting any payment. The dinner was provided freely, and I was happy to host everyone who attended. Sincerely. I hit send so fast. The relief was incredible. The ball was back in her court. It didn't take her long to hit it back. Less than an hour later, I got a text. It was from Aunt Carol. "I received your very dismissive email. I am disappointed that you have chosen to handle this with such immaturity. I was attempting to resolve this quietly and privately. Since you are refusing to take responsibility, you leave me with no choice. I will be filing a claim in small claims court. You can expect to be served shortly. Have the new year you deserve." My blood ran cold. "SHE's threatening to sue me," I texted the group chat. The joke stopped. This had just gone from family drama to a legal threat. My other uncle called me. "Don't worry," he said. "She doesn't have a leg to stand on. A judge would laugh her out of court. This is a bluff to scare you into paying." I knew he was right, but still, the idea of being served papers and going to court over something so stupid was mortifying. The whole situation had just spiraled. My perfect Christmas was now about invoices and lawsuits, and the family was officially divided. It was my parents, my other aunts and uncles, and all my cousins on Team Me. We found out later that Aunt Carol had even called my grandma to complain, and Grandma, who always tries to keep the peace, told her she was being ridiculous. 19 of the 20 guests were on my side. The only one who wasn't was the one demanding $600. Though of course the threat of a lawsuit sent me straight down a late-night internet rabbit hole. I was typing things into Google I never thought I'd type. Can you sue a family member for a bad dinner? Implied contract holiday meal. Small claims court insufficient seafood. The results were pretty much what you'd expect. A lot of people on forums laughing at similar but way less extreme stories. The legal answer was clear. A dinner invitation is a gift, not a contract. My uncle was right. She had no case. But then my searching dug up something wild. A headline from 2013. Aunt Sue's 12-year-old nephew for $127,000 after an overly affectionate hug. I clicked, and I fell into the bizarre, true story of Jennifer Connell. This case went viral for being so outrageous. An aunt at her nephew's birthday party got her wrist broken when the excited 8-year-old jumped into her arms for a hug. Because of a weird quirk in Connecticut's insurance laws, the only way she could make a claim on their homeowner's policy to cover her medical bills was to technically sue the person living at the home, her little nephew. The media branded her Antichrist, and she became this global symbol of family greed. The real story was more complicated, but the jury didn't care. They took less than 30 minutes to rule against her. She got nothing. And one of the key things that sunk her, The defense showed she was seen holding a plate of hors d'oeuvres after she broke her wrist, arguing she wasn't that badly injured. Reading that story felt like looking into a funhouse mirror of my own situation. Another family party gone wrong, another aunt taking legal action, another fight over expectations at a party. Her case was technically more legitimate than my aunt's seafood crusade, but it didn't matter. The jury couldn't get past the image of an adult suing a kid over a hug. So how do you think a judge would react to an aunt suing her niece over a lack of lobster? That comparison gave me this strange sense of power. My aunt's threat was just a bullying tactic. She was trying to weaponize the legal system to scare me. Sure, she could file a claim. She could make me take a day off work and stand in front of a judge to argue about the quality of a free meal. But imagining it just made her threat feel pathetic. I pictured myself in court. Your Honor, I cooked for 20 people. 19 of them had a great time. The 20th sent me a bill. I imagined Aunt Carol trying to explain palate disruption to a judge, and I finally laughed. A real, genuine laugh. She wasn't some monster. She was just a deeply unhappy person. Her only power was my fear, and I was done being afraid. So in the end, did the papers ever get served? Nope. January 1st came and went. No payment, no lawsuit, just silence. I don't know if she ever really planned to me, or if she finally backed down when she realized the entire family was against her. What I do know is, she didn't get her $600. But she also doesn't really have a family anymore. Her little stunt broke us. She didn't come to Easter that year or any birthdays. The invitations just stopped. Her relationship with my mom, her own sister, is basically just a few tense text messages a year. The rest of us are sad about it, but honestly, we're also relieved. It's peaceful now. I learned a really painful but valuable lesson that Christmas. You can't make someone grateful. You can't kill entitlement with kindness. And most importantly, setting a boundary to protect your own sanity isn't aggressive. It's an act of self-preservation. My perfect Christmas dinner was ruined, but I built something better in its place. A backbone. I don't bend over backwards to please people anymore, especially the ones who can't be pleased. The price of admission to my home is mutual respect. It's a price my aunt wasn't willing to pay. And so, she's no longer on the guest list. This whole thing was so wild, and it really makes you think about family, money, and crazy expectations. So I have to ask you guys, what would you have done? Would you have paid the $600 just to keep the peace? Or would you have sent her back an invoice for all your work? Let me know in the comments. I am genuinely curious to see how anyone else would handle this. And hey, if you like stories about navigating insane family drama, give this a like and hit subscribe. Thanks for listening. This is a bottle of 1997 Harlan Estate, or it was asterisk. It's one of the most celebrated Napa Valley wines ever made, a bottle that the legendary critic Robert Parker gave a perfect 100-point score. It represents the absolute pinnacle of American winemaking. I paid $2,000 for it nearly a decade ago. I bought it to mark a personal milestone, a celebration of a hard-won achievement, and I was saving it for a moment that could match the one that earned it. I'd always imagined opening it for my 20th wedding anniversary, or maybe the day my daughter graduated from college. A moment that would live in my memory forever, paired with a wine that was just as unforgettable. Instead, this Thanksgiving, my brother-in-law, Mark, decided to go into my private, climate-controlled cellar without my permission. He pulled this bottle from its rack, cracked it open, and dumped it into a giant glass pitcher with 2 bottles of cheap Merlot, a carton of orange juice, a can of lemon-lime soda, and about 4 cups of sugar. He used my $2,000 bottle of liquid history to make party-sized sangria. And then he and 20 other people drank it all. When I finally confronted him, he just laughed. He said, "It's just grapes, man, relax." He refuses to pay me back. He thinks this whole thing is a joke. So I'm doing the only thing I can think of. I'm taking him to small claims court. And this is the story of how I'm building my case step by step to get my money back and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of justice. I'm taking you with me. To get why this isn't just about the money, you have to understand the wine. This isn't something you just grab off the shelf. This is a 1997 Harlan estate. Critics have called it one of the greatest Cabernet-based wines ever made. It's a blend of 80% Cabernet Sauvignon, with some Merlot and Cabernet Franc from an iconic vintage. They describe it with these soaring aromatics of vanilla, minerals, coffee, and cassis, with a finish that lasts for over a minute. It's a profound wine that you're meant to savor, to think about. It is not, under any circumstance, meant to be mixed with Sprite and orange slices. My passion for wine collecting isn't about getting drunk. It's about history, geography, and art all captured in a bottle. My cellar is my sanctuary. It's just a small room in my basement, but it's meticulously organized and, most importantly, climate-controlled. Temperature and humidity are constantly monitored. It's not a secret place, my family knows about it, but they also know the one simple rule: don't go in there without me. It's not a wine fridge for party overflow. It's an archive. And every bottle has a story. Thanksgiving 2024 was supposed to be a big one. We were hosting for the first time since before the pandemic. My wife and I spent days planning and cooking. The house was filled with the smells of roasting turkey and spices. Family was arriving, cousins were reuniting. It was loud and happy and exactly as it should be. My brother-in-law Mark is, well, he's Mark. He's the life of the party, which is a polite way of saying he's loud, a little oblivious, and always seems to be at the center of some minor chaos he created himself. He's not a bad guy, just careless. He lives completely in the moment, which means he rarely thinks about the consequences. The party was in full swing. People were eating, laughing, watching football. I was just pulling the turkey out of the oven when my wife's cousin came into the kitchen. She was holding a glass of this dark, murky red liquid with a sad-looking orange slice floating in it. She took a sip and made a face. "What on earth did Mark put in the sangria?" she asked. "It tastes weird, kind of oaky and bitter." My blood ran cold. Sangria? Mark never asked me about making sangria. I had plenty of perfectly fine, inexpensive red wine that would have been ideal for it. I walked into the dining room, and there it was. On the buffet table next to the mashed potatoes was a giant glass pitcher, sweating with condensation, filled with a dark red concoction. And next to it, being used as a coaster for a wet spoon, was the empty bottle. I recognized it instantly. The iconic label, the specific shape, the deep punt at the bottom. It was my 1997 Harlan estate. I picked it up, empty. The cork was lying next to it, mangled by a cheap winged corkscrew. My heart just sank. It felt like walking in to find a child had taken a marker to a masterpiece. I looked around the room. A dozen people were holding glasses of it. My uncle was swishing it around his glass like a pro, then gulping it down and saying, "Wow, that's got a kick." I felt sick. I found Mark enthusiastically explaining to my nephew that the secret to good sangria is to use the good stuff. I held up the bottle. "Mark," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "what is this?" He beamed, totally oblivious. "Oh hey, I made sangria, people are loving it, I found that bottle in your little wine room downstairs. Hope you don't mind. Figured it was for a special occasion and, well, look around." I just stared at him, the empty bottle feeling heavier and heavier in my hand. "Mark, this was a $2,000 bottle of wine." The smile slid off his face, replaced by a flicker of panic, then denial. "No, it wasn't," he scoffed. $2,000 for wine. Get out of here." "Yes, Mark, it was." He looked around, saw the looks on the faces of a few people nearby who'd overheard, and immediately went on the defensive. Well, how was I supposed to know? It was just in there with all the other bottles. There wasn't a price tag on it. It's just wine. You have 100 bottles down there." It all went downhill from there. I was in shock, he was defensive, and it cast a pall over the rest of the evening. The joy was just gone. My Thanksgiving was ruined. Not because of the wine, not really. It was because of the casual disrespect. The complete disregard for something that was important to me. The assumption that my property was his to use, his to destroy. The $2,000 mistake wasn't just about money. It was a breach of trust that shattered the holiday. The day after Thanksgiving was quiet and tense. The fridge was full of leftovers, but nobody had an appetite. I knew I had to talk to Mark again, away from the family audience. I had to at least try to resolve this like adults. I called him that afternoon. I started calmly. "Mark, we need to talk about the wine. I was really upset yesterday and I want to explain why." I told him the story of the bottle, why I bought it, what it meant to me. I explained that it wasn't just a beverage, it was a collector's item, an investment, something with deep personal significance. I tried to make him understand what a violation it was for him to go into my private cellar. His response was a masterclass in deflection. "Look, I already said I was sorry you're upset, but you're overreacting. It's a bottle of fermented grape juice. I can't believe we're still talking about this." "It's not just grape juice, Mark. It was a piece of property with significant value. You destroyed it. It's no different than if you'd taken a painting off my wall and used it for a dartboard." He laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving laugh. "Oh, come on. You're not seriously comparing a bottle of wine to a painting, are you? I did you a favor. People drank it, it got used. Isn't that the point of wine?" The point was for me to decide when and how to use it. It was mine. You took it and destroyed its value. You need to make this right. There was a pause. Then he said the words that made me realize this wasn't going to be easy. "I'm not paying you $2,000. That's insane. I'll buy you a nice bottle of something. $100. Take it or leave it." And that was it. Conversation over. He had drawn his line in the sand. My property, my trust, my decade of patience, all of that was worth $100 to him. It was a slap in the face. Family or not, this was theft, and I decided he wasn't going to get away with it. That's when I decided to go to small claims court. A lot of people are intimidated by the legal system, and I get it. But small claims court is specifically designed for regular people to resolve disputes without needing a lawyer. It handles things like landlord-tenant disputes, money owed, and yes, property damage. This was a textbook case. My anger started to turn into a plan. I wasn't just going to be mad, I was going to be prepared. I was going to treat this like a project. My goal: build an undeniable, evidence-based case to present to a judge. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was a legal dispute and I was going to win. The very first and most professional step in this process is a formal demand for payment. You have to show the court you made a real effort to solve the problem yourself before suing. You do this with a demand letter. This isn't just an angry email. It's a formal letter that lays out the facts, who you are, who they are, what happened, and what you want. I sat down and drafted mine carefully. I stated the facts plainly. On November 28, 2024, he entered my cellar without permission, took a 1997 Harlan estate, and used it to make sangria. I stated the value of the item destroyed, $2,000. Then, I formally demanded he pay me back that amount within 14 days. I sent this letter via certified mail with return receipt requested. This is crucial. It costs a few extra bucks, but you get a postcard back signed by the person who received it, proving they got your letter. That receipt becomes a key piece of evidence, so they can't just claim, "I never got it." 2 weeks went by. Unsurprisingly, crickets, no call, no check. His silence was all the answer I needed. A small claims case is won or lost on your evidence. The judge doesn't care about family drama, they care about proof. I needed to buoy. LD a fortress of facts. I actually started a binder and put a label on the front. Mark versus the wine. It was time to fill it up. First up, proof of ownership and value. This is the big one. I had to prove the bottle was mine and that it was worth what I said it was. 1. The receipt. Asterisk, I am meticulous with my collection, and for a purchase this big, you bet I kept the receipt. I dug through my files and found it. The original invoice from the wine merchant from way back in 2015. It clearly listed 1997 Harlan Estate and the price, $2,000. This is gold. 2. Photographs. Asterisk, I had pictures of the bottle from before the incident. I took inventory photos of my cellar a few years ago, and I found a clear shot of the Harlan sitting pristine in its rack. Then I took detailed photos of the aftermath, the empty bottle, the mangled cork, and even a picture of the gross, half-empty pitcher of sangria still in the fridge. This shows a clear before and after. 3. Expert valuation. Asterisk, my receipt proved what I paid, but I also wanted to prove its current market value to show that $2,000 was a reasonable, even conservative ask. I contacted a certified wine appraiser. For a fee, they provided a formal written appraisal. They use auction records and sales data to determine a bottle's fair market value. Their report confirmed that a 1997 Harlan Estate in late 2025 could fetch closer to $2,500. This powerfully backed up my claim that asking for the original purchase price was more than fair. The appraisal fee is another cost I could ask the court to make Mark repay. Second, proof of damage. This part was pretty straightforward. 1. The physical evidence. Asterisk, I kept everything. The empty bottle, the destroyed cork, and I even sealed a sample of the sangria in a jar. It sounds a little crazy, but it's tangible proof that the wine wasn't just consumed. It was used as an ingredient in a concoction. 2. Witnesses. Asterisk, my wife was there when I found the bottle. My cousin was the one who first mentioned the weird-tasting sangria. I asked them if they'd be willing to write a short, signed statement about what they saw and heard. They both agreed. Witness testimony can be incredibly powerful. Third, proof of demand. This is where that certified mail receipt for my demand letter comes in. I taped it to a piece of paper. Perfect, simple evidence that I tried to resolve this the right way first. Part 3. Filing the lawsuit asterisk. With my binder of evidence complete, it was time to make it official. I live in California, so I had to follow their specific small claims process. First, you need to know the limit. In California, an individual can sue for up to $12,500, so my $2,000 claim was well within that. Next, you have to file in the right courthouse. Usually, you file where the defendant lives or where the damage happened. Since Mark lives in the same county and the Great Sangria tragedy of 2024 happened in my house, my local courthouse was the spot. The main form you need is the SC-100, Plaintiff's Claim and Order to go to Small Claims Court. It looks intimidating, but it's actually pretty simple. Section 1. The plaintiff, that's me, full legal name and address. Section 2. The defendant, that's Mark. It is critical to use his full legal name and correct address. No nicknames. Get this wrong and your case can be thrown out. Section 3. The amount. I wrote exactly what I was asking for, $2,000. I also added the court filing fees. In California, it's about $30 to $75. You can ask the judge to add these costs to the judgment if you win. Section 4. The reason. This is your story in a nutshell. You have to be brief. I wrote, on November 28, 2024, defendant entered my private property without permission and destroyed personal property, specifically one bottle of 1997 Harlan Estate wine, valued at $2,000. Defendant has refused to compensate for the damage. Notice I didn't mention Thanksgiving, sangria, or family drama, just the facts. Section 5. The demand. The form asks if you asked the defendant to pay. I checked yes and wrote the date I sent my demand letter. I made copies, took the forms to the court clerk, and paid the filing fee. The clerk stamped everything and gave me a court date about 6 weeks out. The final step before the waiting game. You have to formally notify the defendant they're being sued. This is called service of process, and you can't just hand the papers to them yourself. In California, you can have the court clerk mail it via certified mail, or you can use the sheriff or a professional process server. I paid a professional process server. I wanted zero chance of Mark claiming he wasn't notified. The server delivered the papers to Mark at his home, then filled out a proof of service form, SC-104, and filed it with the court. And now we wait. Mark has been served. The court date is set. My evidence binder is ready. The next chapter of this story would take place in a courtroom. Those 6 weeks leading up to the court date were awkward. There were a few family group texts about birthdays that Mark and I were both on. His messages were breezy and normal, like nothing was happening. I just didn't respond. My wife was stuck in the middle, totally stressed and hoping we would just work it out. But Mark never called. He never offered a dime. He was calling my bluff, and he was about to find out it wasn't one. The week before, I went into final prep mode. I organized my evidence binder with clear tabs: receipt, appraisal, photos, demand letter. I made 3 complete copies, one for me, one for the judge, and one for Mark. Most importantly, I practiced my opening statement. I stood in front of a mirror and timed myself until I could nail it in under 2 minutes. Your Honor, my name is your name. On November 28, 2024, the defendant, Mark last name, entered my locked wine cellar without permission. He removed a bottle of 1997 Harlan Estate wine that belonged to me. He then destroyed the contents of this collectible wine by mixing it with juice and soda to make sangria. This bottle was a high-value collector's item. I'm here today to ask for compensation for my destroyed property. I'm asking for $2,000, which is what I paid for the wine plus my court costs. I have evidence to support my claim, including the receipt, a professional appraisal, photos, and proof that I sent a formal demand letter. I practiced saying it without emotion. The facts were on my side. I just had to present them clearly. I wore a suit. Mark showed up in jeans and a polo shirt, looking around like he was a tourist. He saw me, gave a little "can you believe this" smirk, and sat on the other side of the room. When our names were called, we both walked to the tables at the front. The judge, a woman with a no-nonsense expression, looked at the file and then at me. "All right, Mr. Your name, you're the plaintiff. You may begin." I stood up, hands on my binder, and delivered the 2-minute pitch I had practiced. As I mentioned each piece of evidence, I said, "Your Honor, I have provided a copy of this for you in the evidence binder at tab A," and so on. The judge nodded, flipping through her copy as I spoke. When I finished, I said, "That concludes my presentation." The judge looked at the photos, then at the appraisal. She turned to Mark. "All right, Mr. Last Name, your turn. What's your side of the story?" Mark stood up, looking offended. "Your Honor, I honestly can't believe we're here. This is a family matter. Yes, I made sangria for Thanksgiving. I was trying to be helpful." "Did you have permission to enter the plaintiff's wine cellar?" the judge asked, her eyes fixed on him. "Well, not explicit permission, no," Mark admitted. "But we're family. The door wasn't padlocked. I just went down to grab a bottle of red wine. I saw that one, it looked nice, so I used it. I had no idea it was supposedly worth so much money. How was I supposed to know?" The judge leaned forward. "So, your defense is that you didn't know the value of the property you took?" "Exactly. And besides, it's wine, it's meant to be drunk. I even offered to buy him a new bottle, a really nice one, $100. He's just being greedy." The judge looked back at me. "Mr. Your Name, he claims he offered to replace it." I stood up again. "Your Honor, he offered me $100. The item he destroyed was worth $2,000 as proven by the receipt and the appraisal. An offer of 5% of its value isn't a good faith effort. An item's value isn't determined by the destroyer's ignorance. If he took my car for a joyride and crashed it, saying, "I didn't know it was a new car," wouldn't absolve him of responsibility. The judge nodded slowly, looking back at Mark. "Mr. Last Name, do you dispute the value of this bottle?" Mark shrugged. "I mean, it sounds crazy to me, but he's got a receipt. I guess he paid that, but it's just ridiculous." "It's not for you to decide if his hobby is ridiculous," the judge said sharply. "The question is whether you took and destroyed his property. You've admitted you went into his cellar without permission. You've admitted you took the bottle. You've admitted you used it. The plaintiff has provided clear evidence of its value. Do you have any other defense?" Mark was silent for a moment. He looked flustered. "No, Your Honor, just that this is a family thing and it shouldn't be in court." The judge took off her glasses. "Small claims court exists for exactly this reason," she said. "To resolve disputes over property and money when people can't do it on their own. Family or not, one person doesn't have the right to take and destroy another's property without consequence." She put her glasses back on and looked right at Mark. "Your ignorance of the wine's value is not a defense. The responsibility was on you to ask permission before taking something that did not belong to you from a private area of someone's home. The plaintiff has clearly established ownership, the destruction, and the value." She picked up her gavel. "Judgment is for the plaintiff, Mr. Your Name, in the amount of $2,000, plus court costs of $75 and service fees of $50, for a total of $2,125. This judgment is payable immediately." She banged the gavel. "This court is adjourned." It was over. I had won. I felt a wave of relief, not triumph. I felt vindicated. Mark was just standing there, stunned. He shot me a look of pure fury and stormed out of the courtroom. "Winning is one thing, getting the money is another. The court doesn't collect for you. The debtor has 30 days to pay you. I waited. 30 days came and went. Just like with the demand letter, I got nothing but silence. So I had to start the enforcement process. Because I had that court judgment, I now had legal tools. You can get a court order for things like wage garnishment or a bank levy. I started by filing the paperwork to have him served with an order to appear for a debtor's examination, where he'd have to reveal his assets under oath. Faced with another mandatory court date, he finally caved. 2 days before the hearing, a personal check for $2,125 arrived in the mail. No note, no apology, just the check. I deposited it. It cleared. Once the judgment is paid, you have to file one last form with the court, an acknowledgement of satisfaction of judgment, SC 290, to officially close the case. So was it all worth it? The time, the stress, the family tension. Financially, yes, but on a personal level, the cost was high. My relationship with my brother-in-law is fractured, maybe forever. But this journey taught me something valuable. When you are wronged, you don't have to be a helpless victim. There is a process. It requires patience and diligence, but there is a path to get justice. You just have to be willing to walk it. And that's the whole story. A $2,000 bottle of wine, a pitcher of sangria, and a trip through the small claims system. Now I have to ask you, what do you think? Did I do the right thing? Was the verdict fair, or should family matters always stay out of the courtroom? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to hear different perspectives. And if you found this story and the legal breakdown useful, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing. I have a feeling this won't be my last story to tell. In the end, this was never just about the money. It was about respect. Respect for property, for boundaries, and for the things people hold dear. Sometimes the only way to teach someone the value of something is to send them the bill, certified by a judge. The 1997 Harlan estate is gone forever, reduced to a sugary, forgettable party drink. but the lesson it taught both to my brother-in-law and to me is one that will last a lifetime. Thanks for watching. My parents told me to get over it to keep the peace at dinner. For them, it was just another awkward moment. For me, it was the final straw. That night, I knew I was done. So the next morning at 11 a.m., I packed my car and left them with an empty house and the mess they'd made. This wasn't a snap decision or a flash of anger. It was the result of 30 years of feeling unseen, unheard, and slowly taken apart. It was a quiet, deliberate choice to stop playing a game that was costing me my peace, my health, and my sense of self. Some people might call it drastic, cutting ties completely. They might see it as a tragedy. But for me, it wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. It was the only move I had left when every other attempt to build a healthy relationship was shut down. This is the story of how my family pushed me to the nuclear option, and how walking away from everything I'd ever known was the only way I could finally find myself. The only sound in the room was the clinking of my mother's fork against her plate. It was a sharp, brittle noise that seemed to echo the tension stretched between us. My father stared at his roast beef like it held the secrets to the universe. My older brother, the golden child, just shifted in his seat. The argument itself was stupid. The same old disagreement about a holiday plan that had, like always, turned into a judgment on my life choices. But it was my mother's words, sighed with practiced exhaustion, that landed the final blow. "Can't you just get over it?" she said, not even looking at me. "For once, can we just have a peaceful dinner?" Get over it. 3 words that summed up a lifetime of being told my feelings didn't matter. 3 words that said my reality wasn't as important as the performance of a happy family dinner. It wasn't about the holiday. It was about every time I was told I was too sensitive or too dramatic. It was about every time I was asked, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" In that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it went quiet. The years of fighting to be understood, of hoping they'd change, it all just stopped. I looked at their faces, annoyed and completely uninterested, and I just knew. This was it. The end. Not with a bang, but with a silent, internal surrender. The fight was over because I wasn't willing to be in a war I could never win. That dinner wasn't a one-off thing. It was just the last drop in a bucket that had been overflowing for years. To understand why I packed my car the next morning, you have to understand the 29 years that came before. You have to understand the way my family worked, a system built on unspoken rules, favoritism, and a deep-seated fear of ever talking about anything real. Years later, I'd learned there are names for this stuff. I fell down a rabbit hole of family systems theory, and it was like reading a manual for my own childhood. There was this thing called the nuclear family emotional process, which is basically a fancy way of saying that when parents are anxious and don't deal with their own stuff, that anxiety has to go somewhere. It gets channeled. In our family, it got channeled onto me. I was the designated lightning rod for a storm that had been brewing long before I was born. My brother Mark was born 3 years before me. He was the firstborn, the son, the one who could do no wrong. He fit the mold. He was athletic, successful, and most importantly, he was easy. He never rocked the boat. He gave my parents the reflection of the perfect family they wanted. I, on the other hand, was different. I was quiet, artistic, and I asked too many questions. I felt things deeply, and I had a bad habit of pointing out when the emperor wasn't wearing any clothes. That made me difficult. I was a problem to be managed, not a child to be understood. And this kind of blatant favoritism doesn't just fade away when you grow up. It festers and creates the perfect recipe for estrangement. I'll never forget my 10th birthday. I was obsessed with astronomy and had been circling a specific telescope in a catalog for months. I left hints everywhere. A month before, for his 12th birthday, Mark got a top-of-the-line mountain bike he'd mentioned once. My birthday came and I opened my big gift from my parents. It was a sweater, a perfectly nice beige sweater. Later that day, I overheard my mom on the phone. "I just don't get her," she said, frustrated. "Mark is so simple. You buy him a bike, he's happy. With her, who knows what she wants, it's all so dramatic." My desire wasn't dramatic, it was just mine asterisk. And because it was different, it was dismissed. That became the background music of my life. When your feelings are constantly brushed aside, you learn to stop trusting them. You start to think that what you feel is wrong or an overreaction. My wins were met with a lukewarm, "That's nice, dear," while marks were worthy of a parade. I won a statewide art competition. In high school, my dad's reaction: "Just make sure you're focusing on your real subjects. Art doesn't pay the bills." 2 weeks later, Mark was named captain of the JV soccer team, and my parents threw him a celebratory dinner. This constant comparison, this feeling that I was always falling short, just ate away at my self-worth. You start to feel like you don't even know who you are because your version of reality has always been questioned. So I became a perfectionist, desperate to finally do something that would make them see me. I got a full scholarship to a great university. I graduated with honors. I got a competitive job they thought was respectable. I did everything right, but it was never enough. Every visit home was just another reminder of my place. The conversation always drifted back to Mark, his job, his car, his promotion. My life was a footnote. My parents weren't monsters. There was no screaming or obvious abuse. It was a quieter, more insidious kind of damage. It was the harm of being invisible in the one place you're supposed to be seen. And believe me, I tried to talk to them. In my early 20s, I tried to set boundaries to explain how the comparisons with Mark felt. It was always a disaster. They'd get defensive and start gaslighting me. "That's not what happened," my father would say. "You're just remembering it wrong." My mother's go-to was to make it about her. "Well, how do you think it makes me feel when you say that?" My pain was less important than their discomfort with being called bad parents. It left me feeling more alone than ever. I learned that sharing my feelings was pointless. So I started swallowing it all, which, as I later found out, is a classic route to anxiety and depression. The whole family was stuck in this toxic loop. My parents projected their issues onto me. My brother enjoyed his role as the golden child, and I, the scapegoat, was left carrying all of it. Every dismissive comment, every ignored achievement was another cut. By the time I sat down for that final dinner, I was exhausted. The "get over it" wasn't just a comment, it was proof. Nothing was ever going to change, and that's when I knew I had to stop letting them hurt me. That evening started with a familiar knot in my stomach. Sunday dinners had become something I had to steel myself for. I'd show up out of obligation, holding onto some stupid, childish hope that maybe this time would be different. I'd give myself a pep talk in the car. "Stay calm, don't take the bait, let it roll off your back." But my body knew better. This was not a safe place for me. The house itself looked perfect, the very picture of suburban success. But under the surface, the air was thick with things left unsaid. My mother zipped around the kitchen, a master of performative hospitality, serving up a delicious meal with a side of simmering tension. My father was already hiding behind his newspaper, his usual defense against any real conversation. Soon, Mark and his wife, Sarah, arrived, their easy laughter filling the space in a way my presence never could. We all sat down at the big oak dining table, the stage for every family drama. The conversation was painfully shallow. Whether traffic, some new show, it was a fragile truce and everyone knew the rules. I tried to play along, but then the topic shifted. My mother cleared her throat, signaling an announcement: Christmas. She and Dad had decided to skip the usual big gathering and take a trip, just the core family, a cabin in the mountains. It sounded nice until the details came out. "The deposit is paid," my father said, finally looking up. "We've got 2 rooms, one for us and one for Mark and Sarah." I waited. The silence was heavy. I looked from my father to my mother, who was now meticulously cutting her green beans. Mark stared at his water glass. Sarah shot me a look of sympathy before quickly looking away. "And where am I sleeping?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My mother sighed like she was dealing with a difficult child. Well, honey, there's a loft. It has a pull-out couch. It'll be cozy. A pull-out couch. I was almost 30 with a career and a life, and I was being sent to the kids' table. It wasn't about the couch. It was about what the couch meant. I was an afterthought, an inconvenience. Less than. I'm not sleeping on a pull-out couch, I said, my voice firmer this time. I'm an adult. I'm happy to get my own room nearby, or we can find a bigger place. That was a boundary, a reasonable request. But in my family, a boundary is a threat. My father's face hardened. Don't be difficult. We've already booked it. It's a nice gesture and you're turning it into a problem. It's not a nice gesture if it ignores one of the people involved, I shot back, my heart starting to pound. It feels like I wasn't even considered. Oh, here we go, my mother said, dropping her fork with a clatter. You always do this. You make everything about you. It's just a couch. Why is it such a big deal? And just like that, my feelings were dismissed and twisted into me being selfish. It's a classic move. When you can't defend what you did, you attack the other person's reaction. It's a big deal because it's a pattern, I said, my voice shaking. It's the constant message that I am less important than Mark. It's been my whole life. That's when Mark chimed in. Just drop it, he said, shaking his head like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. Mom and Dad are trying to do something nice. Don't ruin it. His words stung, but it was my mother that finished me off. She looked from my dad to Mark, a silent call for backup against me. Then, without making eye contact, she let out a long, theatrical sigh. Honestly, she said to the room, can't you just get over it? For once, can we just have a peaceful dinner? Get over it. Get over a lifetime of feeling like a second-class citizen in my own family. Get over the deep, primal wound of feeling invisible to the people who are supposed to see you best. In that moment, the fight just drained out of me. I finally saw it with absolute clarity. They would never get it. They didn't want to. My pain was an inconvenience. The illusion of a happy family was more important than my reality. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked down at my cold food and felt this strange, sudden calm. It was the calm of giving up. I finally accepted that I couldn't change them. The only thing I could change was my role in this play. I placed my napkin on the table and pushed my chair back. You're right, I said, my voice oddly steady. You deserve a peaceful dinner. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me, shocked and annoyed. They expected me to storm off and sulk, then come back and apologize for making a scene. They expected the same old dance. But I didn't go upstairs. I walked to the front door, grabbed my coat and purse and left without another word. The cold night air felt amazing. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I knew I was leaving for the last time. The drive home was a blur, but for once I wasn't angry or frustrated. I just felt quiet. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the war is over, and I had just walked off. I spent that night on my couch in the dark, replaying the dinner. Not with emotion, but with a cold, clear head. Every word, every look was a piece of evidence. And the conclusion was obvious. The whole system was toxic, and staying in it was a form of self-harm. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I just heard my mother's voice. Just get over it. The words echoed in my apartment, but they sounded different now. Not like an insult, but like an instruction. She was right. I did need to get over it, but not by burying my feelings. I had to get over it by getting out. As the sun came up, a decision that had been brewing for years finally became solid. This wasn't about a couch anymore. This was about choosing my own sanity. I'd heard about people going no contact and always thought it was extreme. But I realized it's not an attack, it's a last resort. It's the ultimate boundary, and I was there. I didn't make a pros and cons list. I didn't call a friend. I just knew deep in my gut that this was the only way forward. At exactly 11 a.m. I started. It wasn't frantic. It was quiet and deliberate. I moved through my apartment. an apartment in a building my parents owned where I paid reduced rent. It was one of the many invisible strings they used to keep control. Leaving it was the first and biggest snip. I packed my essential clothes, the ones that felt like *me*. I left the dresses my mother had bought me hanging in the closet. I packed my worn-out jeans with the paint splatters and left the beige sweater from my 10th birthday. I gathered my passport, my birth certificate, my laptop. I went to my bookshelf. This was the hardest part. I chose a dozen of my most loved books, the ones with cracked spines and underlined sentences, and said a silent goodbye to the rest. I took down a photo of my college friends but left the family picture on the mantel. I felt a pang of grief, not for the family I was leaving, but for the family I always wished we could have been. The last thing I packed was a lopsided little clay pot I'd made in a pottery class. My father had asked, "What's it supposed to be?" And my mother had suggested I hide it. I wrapped it carefully in a towel. It was a reminder to myself, my work, my efforts, myself. They were worthy of being seen, even if they were imperfect. 2 hours later, it was done. Looking at the half-empty rooms, I didn't feel sad. I felt light. The weight of their expectations and disapproval was lifting. I wasn't just leaving them an empty apartment. I was leaving them with the empty role of the family scapegoat. They'd have to find a new place to put all their anxiety now. Before I left, I wrote a short, simple note. No accusatio. NS, no long list of grievances. That was part of the world I was leaving behind. It just said, I will no longer be living here. I am taking space for myself. Please respect my decision and do not contact me. I left the note and the keys on the counter. As I drove away, the clock on my dashboard read 1:15 p.m. I had no idea where I was going to sleep that night. I had no plan. But for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. I was driving toward an unknown future, but it was finally mine. The first 24 hours were surreal. I drove to a small coastal town and checked into a random motel. The anonymity was a relief. The second I closed the door, I was hit by a wave of exhaustion so deep it felt like it was in my bones. I slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just no noise, but no dread. There was no family dinner to prepare for, no phone call I had to make. All the mental energy I used to spend managing my family was suddenly my own. It felt incredible and totally weird. Then I turned on my phone and the silence shattered. 23 missed calls, a flood of texts. My mother's went from worried to panicked to furious. "Honey, where are you? We're worried. I went by your apartment. What is going on? This isn't funny. This is completely unacceptable. You are worrying your father sick. Call us immediately." My fathers were angry and demanding. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it stops now. Your mother is a wreck. You owe us an explanation." And Mark S. were just condescending. "This is pretty childish. You're tearing mom and dad apart. You need to handle your issues and stop hurting them." Reading the messages, I felt strangely detached. Their reactions were so predictable. There was no self-reflection. No, what did we do? It was all about my behavior and how it was hurting them. It never occurred to them that my leaving was a consequence of their actions. I knew that if I answered, I'd be sucked right back in. The only way to win was not to play. With a steady hand, I blocked their numbers. I blocked them on social media. It felt brutal, but it was necessary. This wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. The days that followed were a mix of grief and freedom. I grieved the family I wished I had. But alongside the sadness, there was peace. The chronic anxiety I'd lived with for years started to fade. The knot in my stomach began to unwind. I spent my time just walking on the beach and breathing. I started journaling again, but this time to get to know myself. Who was I without their approval or disapproval? My identity had been so wrapped up in them, and now there was this empty space I could finally fill with my own self. About a week later, I got an email from my sister-in-law, Sarah. Her message was simple. I don't know the whole story, but I can guess a lot of it. I hope you're okay. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No judgment. Her email was a lifeline. It was one voice from that world validating my reality. I called her a few days later. She told me the fallout was messy. My parents were telling everyone I had abandoned them for no reason, painting themselves as victims and me as the ungrateful villain. It hurt to hear, but it was also the confirmation I needed. I had made the right choice. Living on my own was tough. I found a small apartment and got a job at a bookstore. It was a huge step down financially, but I was trading money for freedom. I was learning my self-worth wasn't tied to a job title. It was something inside me that no one could take away. Months passed. The silence was a gift. I started painting again, and my creativity came flooding back. I was building a new life, a new chosen family based on mutual respect and real affection. Leaving wasn't about walking out on my family. It was about walking back to myself. It's been 3 years. The silence from my parents and brother is still there, a constant reminder of the boundary I drew. I've heard through Sarah that their story hasn't changed. I'm still the ungrateful daughter who vanished. They've never once tried to apologize or understand. That narrative protects them. I eventually moved to a new city where I had no history. Today, I have a job I love, friends who are my real family, and a partner who listens to my feelings, even when he doesn't fully get it. My relationship with Sarah is a quiet, supportive bond, a small bridge to a past I've otherwise left behind. We don't talk about her husband or my parents. We talk about our lives. Going no contact wasn't a quick fix. It was the start of a long, hard journey. It forced me to deal with the deep-seated anxiety and self-doubt that my childhood had left me with. But it also gave me the space I needed to heal. I no longer define myself by my family's rejection. I define myself by my own resilience. The nuclear option wasn't about blowing things up. It was about earing the ground to build something new, a world where I'm in charge of my own happiness. In the end, healing wasn't about who I cut off. It was about who I became when I stopped letting other people's pain decide what I was worth. And I became someone who is peaceful, whole, and finally free.